I didn't cry at the wedding. That's probably the first thing you need to understand about me. Everyone kept watching my face, like they were waiting for something to crack. Some trembling lip, some last-minute breakdown, but I gave them nothing. I stood there in a dress I didn't choose, holding a bouquet that smelled too sweet, staring at a man I barely knew, and I said my vows like I was reading off a receipt. People think silence means strength. It doesn't. Sometimes it just means you've already checked out. His name was Daniel Carter, 34, single dad, construction worker. At least that's what I'd been told. He had a 5-year-old daughter named Lily who clung to his leg during the ceremony, peeking out at me like I was some kind of stranger she wasn't sure she trusted yet. She wasn't wrong. I didn't want this life, not even a little. But my father had made it very clear this wasn't about what I wanted. "You've got 2 choices," he told me 3 weeks before the wedding, standing in his office like a judge handing down a sentence. "You marry him, or you walk out of this family with nothing." Nothing. No trust fund, no apartment in downtown Chicago, no safety net, no connections, no last name that opened doors before I even knocked. I remember laughing when he said it, like it was a bluff. My dad always played hard, but this felt excessive, even for him. "You're serious?" I asked. He didn't even hesitate. Dead serious. I should have fought harder. I should have packed a bag and slammed the door behind me like every rebellious girl in every movie I grew up watching. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life is quieter, colder. I'd grown up in a world where everything had already been decided for me. What school I went to, who I associated with, what kind of future I was supposed to build. Walking away from that wasn't just scary. It felt impossible. So I said yes. Not because I loved Daniel. Not because I believed in any fairy tale my father tried to spin about good men and humble beginnings. I said yes because I was trapped. And Daniel, he knew it. That was the worst part. The first time we met, it wasn't romantic. No sparks, no chemistry, just an awkward dinner at a quiet restaurant my father owned, where Daniel showed up in a plain button-down shirt and jeans that looked a little too worn at the knees. He shook my hand like we were closing a business deal. "Nice to meet you, Emily," he said, his voice calm, steady. I remember studying him, trying to understand what kind of man agrees to marry a stranger under these circumstances. His face was unreadable. Not cold, not warm, just controlled. "You know what this is, right?" I asked him, cutting straight through the polite nonsense. He didn't flinch. "Yeah, I do. And you're okay with it?" He glanced down at Lily, who was coloring on a paper placemat, completely unaware of the tension sitting across from her. "I've done harder things," he said quietly. That answer stuck with me, because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic. It was just honest. Still, I didn't trust him. Not then, not later. Not even on our wedding day. Men don't agree to arrangements like this without wanting something. Money, status, access, something. And my father? He wasn't the kind of man who gave anything away for free. So what was Daniel really getting out of this? That question followed me into the marriage like a shadow I couldn't shake. The first night in his house, I stood in the doorway of what was supposed to be our bedroom, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it was the only thing grounding me. The house itself wasn't bad. Modest but clean. Suburban. The kind of place where neighbors wave at you and kids ride bikes in the street until sunset. It felt normal. Too normal. Daniel carried my bags upstairs without saying much, setting them down by the bed before stepping back like he didn't want to cross some invisible line. "You can take the room," he said. "I'll sleep on the couch." I blinked at him. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "I want to." There was no tension in his voice, no passive-aggressive edge, just that same calm, controlled tone. It threw me off more than if he'd been rude. "You're my wife," he added after a pause, like he felt the need to clarify something. "But I'm not going to force anything." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. That became our pattern. Days turned into weeks, and we moved around each other like cautious strangers sharing the same space. He woke up early, made breakfast for Lily, got her ready for school. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I ended up here. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, not in a creepy way, not even in a curious way, more like he was trying to figure something out, like I was a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces for. And Lily, she was the only thing that felt real in that house. She started talking to me first, small things at the beginning, asking if I liked pancakes, if I knew how to braid hair, if I'd read her a story before bed. I didn't know how to handle her at first. I'd never been around kids much. My life before this was late nights, rooftop bars, and conversations that didn't mean anything. But Lily didn't care about any of that. She just wanted someone to sit next to her while she colored, someone to listen. It was disarming. One night, about a month in, she crawled into my lap while we were watching some cartoon and rested her head against my chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you staying?" she asked, her voice soft, almost afraid. The question hit harder than it should have. "I don't know," I admitted before I could stop myself. She frowned. "I want you to stay." I swallowed, my throat tightening in a way I wasn't used to. "Why?" I asked. "Because Daddy smiles more when you're here." That messed with me, because I hadn't noticed. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. I started paying attention after that. The way Daniel looked at Lily when she laughed, the way he always made sure she had what she needed before he even thought about himself, the quiet patience in everything he did. It didn't match the picture I had in my head of him. Nothing did. Still, something felt off. It was small things at first, details that didn't quite add up. For a construction worker, he didn't come home looking like one. No heavy dust, no exhaustion dragging him down, just a faint smell of something clean, soap maybe. His hours were unpredictable. Sometimes he'd leave early and come back late. Other times he'd be home by mid-afternoon, saying the job wrapped up sooner than expected. And then there were the calls. He'd step outside to take them, his voice low, controlled, like he didn't want me to hear. I told myself it wasn't my business. But curiosity has a way of digging under your skin until you can't ignore it anymore. One evening, I was in the kitchen pretending to scroll through my phone when I heard him in the backyard, his voice sharper than usual. "I said no," he was saying. "Not yet." A pause. "I don't care what the board thinks." "The board?" I frowned, inching closer to the window. "We stick to the timeline," he continued. "No deviations." This didn't sound like a construction job, not even close. Before I could hear more, he turned, catching my reflection in the glass. Our eyes met for a split second, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not guilt, just awareness, like he knew exactly what I was doing. He ended the call a second later and walked back inside like nothing had happened. "Dinner's almost ready," he said, passing me without hesitation. I stared at him, my heart beating faster than it should have. "Who are you?" That question got louder every day, and I was starting to realize I might not like the answer. The first time I tried to dig into Daniel's life, I told myself it was harmless, just curiosity. That's what I kept repeating in my head as I sat at the kitchen table the next morning, my laptop open, his name typed into the search bar like I was about to uncover something simple, something ordinary. Daniel Carter. It was the most generic name in America. I knew that going in. I expected 100 irrelevant results, random LinkedIn profiles, maybe a couple of outdated articles, nothing that actually connected to him. But what I didn't expect was nothing. Not nothing useful, just nothing. No social media, no professional listings, no photos, no public records tied to anything meaningful. It was like he didn't exist online at all, which in 2026 is basically impossible unless you're hiding something or someone is hiding you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling this slow, creeping unease settle into my chest. "Looking for something?" His voice cut through the silence so suddenly that I jumped. I hadn't even heard him come in. I snapped the laptop shut a little too fast, forcing a casual shrug as I turned to face him, just bored. He stood there for a second, studying me. Not suspicious, not accusing, just observant, like always. "Lily's getting ready," he said after a moment. "We're heading out in 10. "Where?" "School," he replied simply. "Then I've got work." I nodded, pretending like that explained anything. It didn't. He grabbed his keys from the counter, but before he walked out, he paused, glancing back at me. "You don't have to stay here all day," he said. "There's a car in the garage. It's yours if you want it." I blinked. "What?" "It's registered under your name now," he added, like that was a completely normal thing to say. "Figured you might need it." I stared at him, trying to process that. You bought me a car? He shrugged. You needed one. That was it. No big gesture, no dramatic explanation. Just a quiet statement like it was no different than picking up groceries. What kind of car? I asked slowly. Nothing flashy, he said. Just something reliable. That answer should have reassured me. It didn't, because nothing about him felt simple anymore. After he left, I waited a few minutes before heading to the garage, and when I saw the car sitting there, I actually laughed under my breath. Nothing flashy, he said. It was a brand new black Range Rover. Not excessive, not over the top, but definitely not something a construction worker casually buys for a woman he barely knows. I walked around it slowly, running my fingers along the smooth surface, my mind racing. Okay, maybe he's got savings. Maybe he made good money on some projects. Maybe... No. Even as I tried to rationalize it, I could feel the cracks forming in every excuse. Something wasn't right. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not exactly. More like intrigue. That same day, I decided to follow him. I know how that sounds. Desperate, maybe a little unhinged, but at that point, I needed answers more than I needed dignity. I waited until he left for work, then gave it about 15 minutes before getting into the Range Rover and pulling out of the driveway. He wasn't hard to find. I kept a careful distance, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my heart pounding harder than it should have been. I wasn't used to this, sneaking around, watching someone like I didn't trust them. But the truth was, I didn't. He drove across town, past the kind of areas I expected, construction sites, warehouses, places that would make sense for the life he claimed to have. But he didn't stop at any of them. Instead, he kept going. Downtown. My stomach tightened as the buildings got taller, the streets cleaner, the cars more expensive. This was my old world, the one I'd been forced out of, and he didn't belong here. So why was he here? I stayed 2 cars behind as he pulled into the underground parking garage of one of the most exclusive high-rise buildings in the city, the kind of place where people don't ask questions because they already know you don't belong unless you're supposed to be there. I hesitated for a second at the entrance, then I followed him in. The security gate opened for his car automatically, no hesitation, no check, like he was expected. My chest tightened as I drove in behind him, the gate closing behind me with a quiet finality that made my pulse spike. This was a mistake, I could feel it, but I didn't stop. He parked on the lower level, stepping out of his car with that same calm, unbothered energy he always carried. I quickly pulled into a spot a few rows back, ducking slightly as I watched him. And then I saw it. A man in a suit walking toward him. Not just any suit. Tailored, sharp, the kind of look that screams money without trying too hard. They didn't shake hands. The man nodded, and Daniel nodded back, like equals, like this wasn't unusual. I felt my stomach drop, because that wasn't how people treated a construction worker. I got out of the car slowly, keeping my distance as I followed them toward the elevators. My heels clicked against the concrete floor, and for a second I worried he'd hear me, turn around, catch me in the act. But he didn't. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. I moved faster, slipping in just before the doors closed. For a brief second, all 3 of us stood there in silence. The suited man glanced at me, then back to Daniel. "Didn't know you had company," he said. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me. No surprise, no confusion, just that same quiet awareness. "My wife," he said simply. The word hit differently in that moment. Wife. The man's expression shifted instantly, something like respect or maybe recognition crossing his face. "Of course," he said, giving me a small nod. "Nice to meet you." I forced a tight smile, my heart racing. The elevator started moving, higher, 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 until it stopped at the top floor, penthouse level. My breath caught in my throat as the door slid open. This didn't make sense, not even a little. Daniel stepped out like he belonged there, because clearly he did. I followed, my mind spinning, trying to piece together something, anything, that explained what I was seeing. The hallway alone was bigger than most apartments. Clean lines, soft lighting, silence that felt expensive. The suited man walked ahead, opening a set of massive double doors. And when we stepped inside, everything changed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Modern design that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Art on the walls that I recognized, not because I was an expert, but because I'd grown up around pieces like that. This place wasn't just expensive, it was elite.
I turned to Daniel slowly, my voice barely steady. "What is this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he loosened his watch, setting it on a glass table like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "This," he said finally, his tone calm as ever, "is where I work." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Doing what?" He met my eyes then, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something shift. Not emotion, not exactly, more like a decision. "Running things," he said. My chest tightened. "Running what?" There was a brief silence, the kind that feels heavier than it should. And then, "Everything," he replied. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Stop," I said, shaking my head. "Just stop. I'm not in the mood for games." "I'm not playing games, Emily." "Then explain this," I shot back, gesturing around us. "Because last time I checked, construction workers don't have penthouses in buildings like this." He didn't flinch, didn't get defensive, didn't even raise his voice. "Last time you checked," he said quietly, "you didn't know anything about me." That hit harder than I expected, because he wasn't wrong. I didn't know him. Not really. But I was starting to realize, maybe that wasn't an accident. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice softer now, but no less demanding. He held my gaze for a long moment, long enough that I could feel the tension building in the air between us. And then he said it. Not dramatically, not like it was some big reveal. Just simply, "My name is Daniel Carter," he said, "and I own the company your father's been trying to buy for the last 5 years." The world didn't spin. There was no dramatic crash of realization, just a slow, quiet unraveling of everything I thought I understood. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just a marriage. It was something else entirely, something I hadn't seen coming, something I definitely wasn't prepared for. And suddenly, for the first time since I said, "I do," I realized I might not be the one who got trapped in this situation. For a few seconds after he said it, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him, like my brain just refused to process the words in the order they came out. "You own the company my father's been trying to buy," I repeated slowly, each word feeling heavier than the last. "That's not funny." I'm not joking. He didn't raise his voice, didn't step closer, didn't do anything dramatic to sell it. He just stood there, calm, steady, like he was stating something as simple as the weather. And that made it worse.
Because if he was lying, there would be cracks. There would be something in his expression, hesitation, arrogance, anything. But there was nothing, just certainty. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, running a hand through my hair as I turned away from him, pacing a few steps across the massive living space. "No," I muttered under my breath. "No, this doesn't make sense." "Which part?" he asked. I turned back to him sharply. "All of it, Daniel. Every single part. You expect me to believe that you're some secret billionaire who just decided to play construction worker and marry me for fun?" "It wasn't for fun." His answer came quick, too quick. I narrowed my eyes. "Then what was it for?" For the first time, he hesitated. It was subtle. Most people probably wouldn't have noticed, but I had been watching him closely for weeks now, trying to read between the lines of everything he said. And that half-second pause, it meant something. "That's a longer conversation," he said finally. "No," I shot back immediately. "We're not doing that. You don't get to drop something like this on me and then decide when I'm allowed to understand it." His jaw tightened slightly, like he was weighing how much to say. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he admitted. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Find out at all, you mean?" He didn't answer, and that silence told me everything. "Oh my God," I whispered, shaking my head. "You were just going to keep lying to me?" "I never lied." I froze, staring at him. "Are you serious right now? I told you what you needed to know at the time." "That's not the same thing," I snapped. "That's called hiding the truth. It's called protecting something until the timing is right." "Protecting what?" I demanded. Another pause, another carefully measured breath. "Lily," he said. That stopped me, not because I believed him instantly, but because of how he said it, like it wasn't an excuse, like it was the only answer that mattered.
What does your secret life have to do with your daughter? I asked, my voice quieter now, but still sharp. Everything, he replied. I searched his face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of manipulation. But again, nothing. Just that same calm control. And it was starting to drive me insane. Then explain it to me, I said. Because right now, all I see is a man who lied about who he is, married me under some kind of deal with my father, and somehow ended up owning a company that's worth more than everything I've ever known combined? You're not wrong, he said. I blinked, caught off guard by how easily he agreed. Then fix it, I shot back. Explain it. He walked over to the window, looking out at the city like he needed a second to gather his thoughts. The sunlight hit him differently up here, sharper, clearer, like I was seeing him in a completely new light. Maybe I was. Your father, he started slowly, has been trying to acquire my company for years, not because he needs it, but because he can't control it. I crossed my arms, listening but not relaxing. That's how he operates, Daniel continued. He buys influence, builds networks, makes sure everything in his reach answers to him in some way. I knew that already. It wasn't exactly a secret. But my company doesn't work like that, he said. We don't sell control. We don't answer to outside pressure. And that's frustrating for someone like him.
So he decided to marry me off to you? I asked, disbelief creeping back into my voice. That's the strategy? Not exactly. Then what? Daniel turned back to me, his expression more serious now than I'd ever seen it. He needed access, he said. A way in. My stomach tightened. And you, what? You agreed to marry his daughter just to give him that? No. The firmness in his voice made me pause. I agreed to the marriage, he said carefully, because it gave me something too. I let out a hollow laugh. Let me guess. Leverage. In a way. Unbelievable, I muttered, turning away again. So this whole thing is just business to you. It started that way. I stopped. Something in his tone shifted just enough for me to catch it. Slowly, I turned back to face him. Started? I repeated. His gaze met mine, steady but different. Yes. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that hadn't been said yet. And suddenly, I didn't like where this was going. Don't, I said quietly. Don't make this something it's not. I'm not making it anything, he replied. I'm telling you what changed. I didn't ask what changed. Maybe you should. The way he said it, it wasn't demanding. It wasn't even forceful. But it landed anyway. Because part of me didn't want to hear the answer. I don't care, I said, even though it didn't sound convincing. He didn't call me out on it. He just took a step closer. Your father thought this marriage would give him influence over me, Daniel said. Access to my decisions, my company, my life. And? I challenged. And he was wrong. Something cold settled in my chest. Then what's the real reason? I asked. He studied me for a moment, like he was deciding whether or not to cross a line he couldn't come back from. And then he did. You, he said. I shook my head immediately. No, it's the truth. No, it's not, I snapped. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know what my father told you, I shot back. That's not the same thing. I didn't agree to this because of your father, he said. Then why? There it was, the question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. And the second it left my mouth, I felt something tighten in my chest like a warning. Daniel didn't look away, didn't hesitate this time. I've been watching you for a long time, Emily. The words hit like a slap. What? I whispered. Not in the way you're thinking, he added quickly, but the damage was already done. My heart started racing, my mind spinning in 100 different directions at once. That doesn't make it better, I said, my voice unsteady now. That makes it worse. I needed to understand who you were before I made the decision. What decision? I demanded. To bring you into my life, he said simply. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one standing in front of me now. Nothing matched. Nothing made sense. You're telling me, I said slowly, that this whole thing wasn't just about my father. It was about me. Yes. Why? I pressed. Why me? For the first time since this conversation started, his expression softened, just slightly. Because you're not like him, he said. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't know that. I do,
he replied. You just don't see it yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. Frustration flared up again, sharp and immediate.
You don't get to control the conversation anymore, I said. Not after everything you just dropped on me. I'm not trying to control anything, he said calmly. I'm trying to keep you from walking into something you don't fully understand. And what exactly is that? I challenged. His gaze darkened slightly. My world. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not because it sounded threatening, but because it sounded real. Then maybe you should have thought about that before dragging me into it, I shot back. I didn't drag you, he said. You agreed. I opened my mouth to argue and stopped because he was right. I did agree, even if it didn't feel like I had a choice. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. Everything I thought I understood about my situation was unraveling faster than I could keep up with. My father, this marriage, Daniel, none of it was what it seemed. And the worst part, I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Not him, not my father, not even myself. Take me home, I said finally, my voice quieter now, drained. Daniel studied me for a moment, like he was trying to read something beneath the surface. Then he nodded. Okay. No argument, no resistance, just that same calm acceptance. And somehow, that unsettled me more than anything else, because I had a feeling this wasn't over, not even close. The drive back felt longer than it should have, not because of traffic or distance, but because of the silence sitting between us. It wasn't the kind of quiet we'd had before, awkward, distant, unfamiliar. This was different, heavier, like every word we hadn't said was pressing down on the air inside the car. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the city slowly gave way to quieter streets, then to neighborhoods that looked like the version of life I was supposed to accept. Lawns, driveways, kids riding bikes, people who probably slept just fine at night without questioning everything around them. I used to think that kind of life was boring. Now it just felt unreachable. Daniel didn't try to fill the silence. He kept his hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road, like nothing had changed. But everything had. You should have told me, I said finally, my voice cutting through the quiet without me even turning to look at him. I know. That simple answer irritated me more than if he'd argued. That's it? I snapped, turning toward him. You know? What do you want me to say, Emily? I want you to explain why you thought it was okay to lie to me from day one. I didn't lie, he said again, calm as ever. Stop saying that, I shot back. You hid who you are. You let me believe you were someone else. That's a lie. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't raise his voice. It was necessary. For who? I demanded. You? My father? Because it sure as hell wasn't for me. For all of us, he said. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. You don't get to decide what's best for me. No, he agreed quietly. But I do get to decide how I protect what matters. And what exactly matters to you? I asked. He didn't answer right away. And that hesitation, it felt deliberate this time. Lily, he said eventually. Something inside me twisted. Everything comes back to her with you, I muttered. Because she's everything, he replied without missing a beat. I looked away, pressing my lips together. That part, I believed. I'd seen it. The way he looked at her, the way he showed up for her without fail, there was nothing fake about that. But it didn't erase everything else. You don't trust me, I said after a moment, quieter now. I didn't know you, he corrected. And now? I asked, glancing at him. He didn't answer, which, somehow, was worse. The car rolled into the driveway, the engine cutting off with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have in the silence. For a second, neither of us moved, then I reached for the door handle. Emily, his voice stopped me. I froze, my hand still on the handle, but I didn't turn around. What? I asked. There was a pause behind me. I could feel him thinking, choosing his words carefully like he always did. Whatever you think this is, he said slowly, it's not a game. I let out a quiet breath, my fingers tightening slightly. It feels like one, I replied.
and then I got out of the car. The house looked the same as it always did, unchanged, ordinary. But stepping inside felt different now, like I was walking into a place I didn't fully understand anymore. Lily's laughter echoed faintly from the living room, pulling me out of my thoughts for a second. She ran toward me the moment she saw me, her small arms wrapping around my waist without hesitation. "You're back," she said, her voice bright, completely unaware of the storm sitting just beneath the surface of everything. I forced a small smile, resting her hand on her head. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm back." She pulled away slightly, looking up at me with that same innocent curiosity she always had. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She studied my face for a second longer, like she was trying to decide if she believed me. Then she smiled again, like kids do when they choose the version of reality that feels safer. "Daddy said we might have movie night," she said excitedly. Of course he did. I glanced toward the kitchen, where I could hear him moving around, like everything was normal, like we hadn't just turned everything upside down. "That sounds fun," I said, even though my mind was still spinning. Lily grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the couch, already talking about what movie we should watch, what snacks we should get, completely wrapped up in her own little world. And for a moment, I let myself sink into it, because it was easier than thinking. Easier than asking questions I wasn't sure I was ready to hear the answers to. The night passed in a blur of soft lights and quiet distractions. Lily fell asleep halfway through the movie, curled up against me like she always did. At some point, Daniel came over, carefully lifting her into his arms. "Go get some rest," he said quietly, his voice softer than I'd heard it all day. I nodded, standing up slowly, trying not to wake her. But as he turned to carry her upstairs, something in me shifted. "Daniel." He paused, glancing back at me. "What?" he asked. I hesitated, the words sitting heavy in my chest. "Why me?" I asked again. Not defensive this time, not angry. Just honest. He studied me for a long moment, Lily resting against his shoulder, completely at peace in a way I hadn't felt in days. "I told you," he said quietly. "You're not like him." "That's not enough," I said. "It is for me." I shook my head slightly. "You built an entire life around secrets, around control, around whatever all of this is."
I gestured vaguely, frustration creeping back in. "And you expect me to just believe that I'm somehow different enough to be part of it?" "I don't expect anything," he said. "I made a choice. At my expense," I pointed out. His expression hardened slightly. "No," he said. "At mine." That made me pause. "What does that mean?" I asked. But he didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted Lily slightly in his arms and turned toward the stairs. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said. And just like that, he walked away, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. Again, I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment, every small detail that suddenly felt like it meant something more. The way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he watched everything without reacting too quickly. None of it was random. None of it was simple. And somewhere in the middle of all that thinking, one thought kept coming back, louder than the rest. If he wasn't the one trapped in this marriage, then what exactly had I walked into? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I groaned softly, reaching for it without checking the time. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, "Emily." My entire body went still. I knew that voice. "Dad? I think it's time we had a conversation," he said, his tone calm, controlled, exactly the way it always was. A cold feeling settled in my chest. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to know what your husband has told you," he replied. Of course he did. I sat up slowly, my grip tightening on the phone. "Why don't you tell me?" I said, "since you seem to know everything already." There was a faint exhale on the other end, like he was amused. "Be careful, Emily," he said. "You're in a situation you don't fully understand." "Funny," I muttered. "That sounds familiar." "I'm serious," he continued, his tone sharpening slightly. "Whatever he's shown you, whatever he's told you, it's not the full picture." "And you think you're going to give me the full picture?" I challenged. "Yes." I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. "Why would I trust you?" "Because I'm the only one who's not lying to you," he said. That hit a nerve. "Is that supposed to be a joke?" I snapped. "You can be angry later," he replied, completely unfazed. "Right now you need to listen." I hesitated. Every instinct in me said hang up. But another part, the part that needed answers, stayed. "What?" I asked. There was a brief pause. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You think you married a powerful man," he said, "but you have no idea what he's actually capable of." My heart started pounding. "What is that supposed to mean?" I demanded. "It means," my father continued, his voice quieter now, more deliberate, "that Daniel Carter didn't build his empire playing nice." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "And whatever he's told you about protecting Lily," he added, "you might want to ask yourself who he's really protecting her from." The line went silent. But I didn't move, didn't speak, because for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't sure which version of the truth was worse.